Alright guys, so you're watching this video because you want to swap out a gearbox in a John Deere Gator made by Perego. More than likely it's got a clunking, grinding noise in the gearboxes from slamming from forward to backwards, or it's a blown motor. Either way, I've had a lot of people very confused to how do you get to the gearboxes? Well, I'm going to go through that step by step in this video. And to get started, the tools you're going to need is a Phillips screwdriver, preferably a driver, a 13mm socket. I'm going to actually use two, one for each end of the axle, needle nose pliers to help get the pin out of the bed, and a very small screwdriver to pry out your hubcaps. So I'm going to set this up on a tripod and I'm going to go through this step by step how to get into those gearboxes. Alright guys, so step one is to remove the 4 plastic thumb nuts that are located underneath the tub. So if you tilt this up, you'll have to just unscrew those and pop off the seat. Step 2, remove this pin that holds the lift. Step 3, remove your shifter. And that allows you to be able to pop the bed cover off. There is 2 little prongs here. Alright, so that gets you access to the actual gearboxes and motors. The next step is to remove your hubcaps, both of them, because if you only do one side, the axle's just going to spin. Alright, so we're going to put, if you have a helper, that is great because you're going to have to put a 13mm on one side and a 13mm on the other and loosen it. And you never know which nut comes off. So it was the passenger side, so you only need to do one. So we're going to pull, actually let me move the camera here. Alright, so we loosened up the nut, so what we're going to do is take the tire off. And you just pull your axle out. Now, the reason that you had to get access into here, well obviously you got to pull the gearboxes out. But underneath the gearbox, you're going to see this little white thing. It looks like a marshmallow. And they're kind of tricky to get out because you can't pull the gearbox out without moving that spacer. So once you guys get that spacer out, you can do the gearboxes. Now, just do one side at a time, guys. And pay attention, if you're replacing the motor, pay attention to what side the red wire is. You can see there's a red dot on there. So if you're replacing this motor and you push this little tab in and that pulls it off, you're going to have to replace that onto the red. So I would take a Sharpie and put an R and a B for blue over here. So to make this easy to work on, I'm just going to remember that red, that's the normal polarity, because on the other side it's actually got to be switched, so otherwise it would spin backwards, if that makes sense. So you can see why we're replacing this. It cut right in and it was actually rubbing on the gears. So we're going to pull this apart and swap it out. All right, so we got the gearbox swapped over. Yes, it's green. I actually think this is the original gearbox. I don't know if they switched it trying to get things going, kind of like an unqualified mechanic, just start switching parts because it wasn't working at the shifter. So what I do recommend is when you have the screws in there, put a little dab of blue Loctite on each one before you tighten the screws. And don't over tighten them, just get them snug. So reconnect the wires. Remember, on driver's side, red wire gets the red tab. And it is easiest to put the little spring thing on the outside so you can easily get to it. Drop it back in place. So once you put that white spacer in, you either have to take the axle or a screwdriver and kind of wiggle it and get it lined up. So now, if you're going to replace tires, this would be a good time to do it too, but you're just going to put the axle back in. And I haven't done the other side yet, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't need to show you that. It's the exact same thing. You're just going to have to pay attention to where you put the wires. All right, so once you got your axle through, just put your wheel on and make sure you're lining up the cross drive with your little X there. And sometimes you have to slide the axle because it pushes back. And just put your nut on. All right, so a little tip that I use to help me tighten this back up is I take vice grips and I put it on the center of the axle. Make sure you get her nice and tight so it doesn't spin. And that will allow you to just do it from one side and tighten that lock nut right up. Don't forget to take the vice grips off. Ask me how I know. All right, the last step is to do what we did in reverse. We're gonna have to put the bed cover back on. And normally I take the bed right off, but the previous owner in their repairs, they damaged the pins so bad that I couldn't kind of grab onto them or pry them off. So I was like, hey, let's try this. But normally, yeah, I get access to these pins right here and I pull them out and just remove the whole bed. So this is actually the first time I've ever done this. So you have to slide the round pipe under, and then it's got these two alignment dowel holes. So we're gonna have to try and see if we can, there, get that lined up. Be careful of your motor wires right here. And then it's also got two pins that you can manipulate and get down in there. And then same thing in the front here, there's two more alignment pins, and you can just kind of flex that a little bit and pry them down in the spot with your screwdriver. All right, so once you got your bed cover back on, you're gonna have to put your shifter back in place. There's a groove that slides underneath, and then these two little pins also need to pivot and rock under, and then you can kind of wiggle it down in place and put in your two Phillips screws that hold the shifter in. Oh, and here's a tip. You probably should test it. Make sure everything works before you put this all back together. I have done this a few hundred times, so I kind of knew what to expect. But that's a good tip. So next step is put your hubcaps back on. All right, so once you got your bed cover in, go ahead and replace your actuator pin. And then we're going to install the seat. As you notice, there's several adjustments for seat. If you got a little guy, you want the seat forward. Big kids, you want the seat as far back as possible. And that is